And you are live on YouTube.
Thank you. Welcome to Economic Growth and Development. We're going to start with workforce and training today. Hi, Liza.
Good afternoon.
Wait, one sec before you. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the prior meeting? Yes?
I move,
Thank you, Supervisor Leggett.
I will second. Yes.
Any comments, questions, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now, Liza, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. No problem. You have before you just one resolution request this month to amend our budget to receive our federal allocation of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, the federal grant that funds my department. And then I'm happy to go through updates for this year compared to last year in the draft budget.
I have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Fraser. For a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Supervisor Wild. Go ahead, Liza.
Sure, thank you. So this year we, and just as a reminder, we have a different fiscal year than the county. So our program year and fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. And it usually takes the federal government a few months to start giving us the federal dollars, but we're able to carry over 20% of our budget from the previous year. So that always carries us through the summer. But this year compared to last year, we have about $76,000 more in the budget, which is wonderful. And we do have to factor in a few things. So you will see on the line item sheet that we are paying more this year for the Workforce Development Board, which you guys voted on a couple months ago, 1 or 2 months ago, which is fine. They need that during these times. And then you'll see in the line items, we have increased our training budget. Last year, it was about $35,000. This year, I've budgeted for about $50,000. We do help sponsor Warren County residents through training programs who qualify, right? So we have students that we sponsor through nursing programs and CDL programs, and we've already been approving those as the school year has started. And then I just wanted to remind you that we have reimbursements as well that come from our partnerships, for example, with DSS and probation. So that helps cover our employees' salaries for the hours they spend supporting those departments with employment programs. I am waiting to see if personnel requests go through, right, for our union employees. And so the second page will be updated once those are voted upon for union and non-union employees. I have proposed upgrading 2 of my employment counselors to employment and training counselor 2s. And I worked with CSEA on that. And that would only be about an $8,000 total increase to my budget for salary and fringe for those 2 employment counselors. The reason why I wanted to do that is because for 2 of my employment counselors, they have been creating and teaching content to classes, and that was not included in their job description. So working with CSEA, we have determined that some job descriptions needed updating, and also it allows for some opportunities for advancement and growth in our department if there's an employment and training counselor 1 and an employment and training counselor 2. So all of this in mind, I am not, concerned about our budget. We're in a pretty healthy place, especially since we can carry over from previous years. And we have some other small grants that are less restrictive than WIOA that we can use where we need. And then, of course, our reimbursements from other departments. So we're in a pretty good place financially, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Liza. Are there any questions? Supervisor Leggett?
I'm missing the printout on this.
Me too.
You can access it through the county website. Can you guys get us a printout for Liza's, please? Yep. Thank you. You guys want to wait and we'll come back around to that vote?
Actually, we don't have to vote on it.
We do. It's a budget amendment.
Oh, budget.
It's a budget amendment.
Right.
The budget presentation.
She's on a different calendar than we are.
Right.
So this is an amendment to her budget. And there is a motion on the floor. What do you guys want to do? You want to wait until you have paper in your hands? We'll come back to it. Yes, no,
So
I don't have a problem with voting on it, but I don't know what everybody else wants to do.
I'm good.
you're good voting?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll call the question. All in, oh.
Can you repeat? I must have been up looking for the file when the motion was made. What is the motion on the floor?
Let's get the exact wording. Resolution request to amend the budget for 2021, 2022 and receive federal grant allocations. Specific to WIOA, right, Liza? If there's
Correct.
something, yeah.
Yeah, it's no county dollars. It's all the federal grant that funds my department.
Thank you.
I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Liza, did you have anything else for us?
That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. All right, we'll move on to planning department now. Hi, Wayne. You guys have that paperwork?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, revision number 3, I think it is. I was going to say good morning, but it's good afternoon. I have 3 resolution requests before the committee this morning. We have been talking about the CARES Act funding and Countryside. And last Friday, we did receive the contract for Countryside for $810,932. I forwarded that to the county attorney's office, but we need some resolutions to make that happen. The first one is actually to establish the account at the county. I talked with Rob Lynch this morning. He was on vacay last week, so we got the codes established, and that was added this morning to establish CD 77 Countryside CARES Act. So I'd ask the committee's consideration of that.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Supervisor
second it.
Garrity. Thank you, Supervisor Fraser. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, Resolution 123 of 2021 authorized the submission of the grant application, but it did not have authorization for the chair to sign the contract documents. This resolution request before you is to amend that resolution to allow for execution of the contract and associated documents.
Supervisor Garrity,
Second.
Supervisor Fraser. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The next item is to establish the ARPA Advisory Committee. We've had some informal meetings with Supervisor Hogan and others, and there's a desire to formalize that advisory committee, and the resolution request is here naming the members that would be on the advisory committee. This is the committee that would meet on a consistent basis, and for selected meetings, various professionals from the community would come in to supplement that, but this is the group that is recommended to actually work on the county's response.
And then to be clear, those recommendations will come through this committee and onto the full board.
Correct.
Where did these recommendations come from? Sure.
They came out of a working group that got together and tried to come up with a comprehensive group that would work across the entire county and across all of the identified areas of potential funding. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion for you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fraser. Can I get a second on that? All right, we'll move it without a second.
I'm sorry, I have a conflict. Got my name in it.
This is true. No second? We can move it without a second. You'll second, Supervisor Leggett? Thank you. Is there any discussion on this? So-
And who does this task force report to then?
This committee
And that'll be on a monthly basis and.
will
whatnot.
update on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Good luck.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just one thing, it's, the request says that we're appointing the members of an ARPA advisory committee. This is actually a task force then, not a committee?
What's the right term? Working group, task force, committee?
A task force or a working group. A committee would actually meet here in public session a task force or a working group meets and then they bring their findings back to this committee.
Task force. Yes.
If I may, Ms. Allen, this was as a result of our discussions that we had after the board meeting on Friday, so that it was publicly noticed, we met all the requirements, and that we could engage both the public and members of the board, as frequently and transparently as possible. I believe it was the thought in the same way that planning has created a couple other, I think that this is how you created, like maybe it was your climate change board or a few other boards they've been submitted to the committee has established them, then the committee sets it to the full board then votes on it. So I don't know what you want to call it, but we just want to comply with all the open meeting laws.
Right. Well, that's what I'm just looking at it here, looking at the members, and we need to compare that to the standing committee list to make sure you don't have a quorum of any committee. If you have a quorum, even though it's a task force, it needs to be an open to the
Right,
public
that was the
meeting.
goal of this,
Yep.
to comply with all the open meeting laws. So,
So these meetings will be held in public?
Yep.
Or they're- Okay.
No problem with that.
so we want it on that list of,
You wanted it to be like a standing committee,
Correct.
like a special committee.
Yeah.
So it's a committee.
that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
it is a committee.
We were just trying to comply with the concern that you had the other day of, making sure that anytime any of us are together and we're talking business, that we've got,
Exactly.
we're complying with all the rules.
Yep. So this will hit the standing committee list under special committees
Yes.
after it's approved by the
Yep.
board.
That was
Yeah.
the intent.
It will be around for a while, so.
Okay.
The ARPA money.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
No, that's all right. Any further discussion, Craig? Supervisor Leggett? No? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor?
I,
And I will abstain.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Discussion items, Wayne?
Okay, the next item on the discussion, first item on the discussion items is the state has announced housing funding programs. Quite honestly, our department is, when we downsized a number of years ago, we kind of lost our housing delivery capability. We are looking to partner with the city on some of their programs, and we would, we've talked with them, and they will undertake some programs outside of the city boundaries with our department helping them on that. So there's really nothing for the committee to do. I just wanted to have you aware that we are, even though we don't have a housing program in-house, we are still trying to address some of those needs. And the city will have a new home ownership program and a housing rehab program that we look to participate outside of the city limits with. So the next item is a quick review of our department budget request. I will say that I find, I thought this was a little complicated process until I listened to Janelle and some of the others. And, I think we get off kind of easy with only 4 budget codes here. There is a memo to the Budget Review Committee that I've included here. We did meet with the Budget Review Committee on the 18th of August. And, the process is I have control over the .4s, some budget staffing changes, and revenue. So those are the areas that were impacted. The rest of it is by CSEA contract. And there's on my memo, there's on page 2, there's a table that kind of summarizes the changes. We're impacted by the fact that there was not a CFA round last year, so there were no funding awards that had any kind of administrative dollars that we could bring in. We are closing out, I believe, 6 different grant awards this year, so there'll be nothing to carry over. Now, we did get Countryside funded, and working with Kevin Hajos and Ed up at DPW on that. They're taking the lead, but it is a $2.2 million renovation to Countryside with the grant funds and the bond resolution that was passed last Friday. So that's a significant project. There's, I believe there's about $10,000 worth of administrative dollars in that, because the trend with the state is that they want to fund you, they want to fund the project, but they don't want to fund administration. They've been cutting administrative dollars. Quite honestly, when they get funding from the feds, the feds allow a certain administrative dollar line for certain dollar line for administration. The state's keeping most of it to administer the program at the state level. So that has impacted our revenues. And that's where the big difference in the budget is really, when you look at the 80-21 budget, which is our department per se, our revenues are projected to be down by $46,000. And that's just a, no funding round last year, and some grants that we've got expiring, and the reduction in the administrative dollars that are provided in the grants that we do have. So that may change. We have roughly $800,000 worth of grant requests out there that we haven't heard on. There are some administrative dollars in those. If they get funded, we can incorporate those in at a later date when we accept and amend the budget for the acceptance of the grant. In the 80-21 budget, our .4s are up by $1,700, and that's really, to get some in-person training for some people. Zoom and YouTube is great, but there's nothing like going and sitting at a conference with some people and having that chat after a formal presentation where you can discuss things and gain ideas. So I've put in some attendance at a national conference for one of the staff individuals, which would be Ethan. So the other significant budget that we're involved with is the 80-22 budget, which is GIS. And I think at last Friday's board meeting, you heard the chairwoman express thanks and appreciation for Sarah's efforts with the NISAC conference. I had gotten an email from Alex Lamont at NISAC asking if we could help. I turned it over to Sarah, and a couple hours later, they're shooting emails back and forth and getting everything figured out what they needed. So that was great to be able to do that. And I am appreciative that there was recognition at NISAC for that. The big difference for 80-22 for GIS is the .4s are up. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is we want to have a technical services agreement with VHB. They write specific code that is used in some of the GIS applications. Since they service a number of clients, they can take the time to learn all the new code every time there's an upgrade to the ESRI software. To ask Sarah to do that would be really not a productive use of her time. We'd rather just buy the service from somebody who's already running some of their applications, and they can just provide the update as we need it. So,
Wayne, hang on a sec. Supervisor Garrity?
What's ESRI stand for?
oh yeah, right. Environmental Systems Research Institute, and they are the ArcGIS software.
Okay, thanks.
So, boy, I'm surprised I remembered that after all these years.
Yeah.
So,
Good stuff, and
there you go. The other significant increase here is we have been, and in the memo, I kind of refer to it as creative with the use of licenses that we have from ESRI. But really to comply with our contract with ESRI, we need to buy more licenses. We are also going to add 2 licenses for DPW, 1 for tourism. And so there's roughly an additional $4,900 in licenses over what we currently have. And quite honestly, that will make us legal according to our contract. So those are significant impacts with the 80-22 budget as it's presented. I have some recommendations, but the net effect with the reduction in revenues, the increase in .1s and .8s, is that roughly the county share is $83,000 more recommended next year. That's the ask. So I can go into some of my recommendations, my proposals if you want at this time, or is there any discussion on what was presented so far?
Any questions? Supervisor Leggett?
Just a comment. I think it's very proven that the GIS, the utility, it provides all of the county in so many different areas. It's definitely worth the investment and keeping it legal. So
So, all right.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Some suggestions or some recommendations I would ask for consideration in the budget process. We would like to move our current senior or junior planner, I'm sorry, over to GIS as a GIS technician. That makes sense because that's basically all she's doing now. And that has quite honestly freed Sarah up to do a lot of other higher end stuff, if you want to call it that, such as the NISAC, such as the COVID hub, that normally she would have spent time just, building spreadsheets. So it allows us to better utilize her technical capabilities and her administrative capabilities. So we would move as I said, the junior planner over to a GIS technician. Also, I would ask, a couple of years ago when the budget got real tight, we took away a lot of the overtime in the department. Not that we had a lot, it was $2,700. And we kept 500, but since I have a couple of positions that are union, and if they have to work an evening or go to a meeting, I am required to pay overtime. I'd like to increase that back up to $2,000. Okay, the elephant in the room is that I will retire. I've said this before, but I will retire in 2022. And so we need to kind of plan out for that. And as part of that process, I think we need to bring in, put the senior planner position back in the department budget and bring some people on board next year. So that's not reflected dollar wise in the budget, but that's something, we would increase the budget when the person is hired, but I would like in the table of organization to have the senior planner slot reinstituted into the budget. And the last thing is, and on page 3 of my memo, I've spelled it out, but Sarah worked for us for a number of years, left to the private sector, started a family and then came back and worked part-time for us. And then went to full-time a couple of years ago. At the time she came back to full-time, she actually took an hourly cut in pay. And we were going to take care of that. And then things happened, budget constraints happened, COVID happened. So I'd like to correct that. So the request is that we increase her grade, which I think is merited, from a grade 16 to a 17, and extend her out to her highest category in that. So in essence, it's going from a 78,000 and some change to 85 and some change. I personally think it's merited and warranted, but I'll leave that up to the budget process to determine. So those are my recommendations. If instituted, those recommendations would result in a county share increase of 91,666 versus the 83,936 that's leaving staffing where it all sits. So that's what I have for consideration, and I'm open for comment.
Thank you, Wayne. Supervisor Wild?
Madam Chair, I would just like to commend Wayne for the work that he's done and his team. His last paragraph on page 3, I think everyone in this room that's had experience working with Sarah and seeing what she's been able to accomplish at oftentimes breakneck speed, I think that's warranted. And I would like to propose that we just at least include that in the budget for this year.
Frank?
I hear you.
He hears us.
What does that mean, if you don't mind?
Well, I don't know. Some of the news I've heard this morning, you might not be so happy. So. But anyways, yeah, I can do it. I will.
Thank you.
So that's all I have for the committee, unless there's further comment.
Is there further discussion or questions for Wayne?
Unless you want a 10% increase in your tax.
Yeah. 2022.
Yeah.
Is that this coming year? Or is that like somewhere around 2024?
You never know. You know, I've been bought out before.
Oh, well.
I felt like you said it on video here. We've got it. We've got it on tape. Thank you very much, Wayne. All right, Jim Siplon, EDC, ready?
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's the kind of day that helps you understand why so many people want to come live here. So my goal is to try to see if we can work to get you guys back on track schedule-wise. You'll be happy to know I have no charts for anybody to put up. Should make this go a little bit quicker. There's a couple of topics I just wanted to cover and keep you up to date on. This is our monthly update about economic development, but also about the LDC. And so there's a couple of notable things in each of those areas. To begin with, in the EDC, I'd like to tell you about where we stand on broadband, and there's a lot of good news there. What we're working on together with the county and many others with regard to housing and how that may continue to be an important topic for us all to be working on for the near future. And then some activity around the business community that would be useful for you to know. I'd also like to thank Supervisor Hogan for helping to organize a meeting that we had last week with the Chamber and with the Warren Washington County IDA and with Washington County's Economic Development Resources. We're working probably more collaboratively with them than we have in some time, but it's always helpful to have others like the county come in to engage in that process. And there's a couple of things that came out of that discussion that I'd also like to share with you. Well, let's go back to broadband quickly. The last time I talked to you, we were in the process of submitting a grant for what was known as the NTIA, which is a 6-county, fairly precedent-setting grant that would help address several thousand unserved residents of the North Country. But I wanted to try to remind everybody about exactly where we stand. We continue to have a working group that helped build that grant, meets weekly, that the EDC chairs, and it has representatives from carriers and from the various communities that participated in the grant exercise. It's a pretty amazing group to think that after we submitted the grant, they still want to meet weekly and work together on the problem. In that, we got a briefing from several of the carriers last week. And at a previous meeting, I had shared some charts with you that looked something like this, you know, that had pictures of different coverages of broadband that were in the process of being developed, but perhaps had not yet fully been turned up. In this week's session, we got updates saying that this week and next, a total of 1,700 homes in Warren County will have gone through the full completion and light up process. There will be nothing left of that pending status. There were several in your area, Kevin, I know in Warrensburg. There were several in Thurman. There were several in Johnsburg. Yes, Slick is the majority of it. It's not all Slick. There's a little tiny bit of Verizon and Frontier, at least from their activity that was needed to support that. But think about this. A year ago, we were trying to figure out where we stood. Today, somewhere north of 90% of the residents of Warren County have access to true broadband. And by that, I mean not satellite broadband, not DSL broadband, but at least cable standard broadband, more than 25 megabits per second, both up and down, including 1,700 that never had anything, that literally did not have any choice but DSL and satellite, 1,700 in a year. In addition to those 1,700 addresses that have now got access, they passed more than 2,000 homes, which means that many addresses now have a competitive choice that they did not have before. Regardless of whether we win this 6-county grant, Warren County is in a much better place from a broadband standpoint than it was a year ago. And I'm proud to share that with you because this is not an accident. It came from your very deliberative direction to us and to others to focus on it, and then to collaborate to our maximum ability for maximum outcome. This is an example, I think, of how we work really well together. I remember the very first meeting I had was with you, Kevin, and others, and we were not in this place. We did not know where we were. We did not know how we were going to get what needed to be done. And we certainly didn't have the idea that we were going to be leading an effort across 6 counties to take on the next chapter of this. But that's indeed the case. And I know some of you at the NACO conference, I know they talked about Warren County and what's gone on here. I'm giving a presentation along with Bill Farber at the New York State Conference for EDCs, where they want to talk about how we're doing what we're doing. That's a really wonderful thing for this county. And I want to thank you for your leadership and your support through that whole process. There's still work to be done. If that NTIA grant comes through, another 450 addresses in Warren County will be addressed. But we're now down to several hundred addresses that do not have a suitable choice in Warren County. And I think compared to your peers throughout the state, you're in a very, very good position. And that's important because we've discovered that for this economy to grow, 2 things are absolutely required: universal broadband and housing, which brings me to my next point. Housing is the area that we're focusing on with the same intensity that we did broadband a year ago. We're not done with broadband. We continue all those efforts. We chair the same groups that we did. We continue to drive this to closure. But on housing, we need that same level of intensity as we had a year ago. The reason for that, I've shared some of that data with you. We have a historically low share stock of housing here. As of the end of July, and I still haven't seen the August data, but I'm certainly been given no indication that it's significantly better. But as of the end of July, there were less than 150 single-family homes available across all of Warren County. If you separated out those that were more than 500,000, we had literally about 70 homes available in the entirety of Warren County. At the same time, we only had several, maybe between 200 and 300 openings for apartments, which means all told, we had less than 350 housing opportunities in our county. At that same time, Liza has shared with you, I think quite regularly, the updates on employment and job numbers, but we still have more than 1,000 job openings in Warren County. If we only have 300 places for people to live, we have a problem. We don't have the ability to bring workforce in here. This is not a problem that is a one-year problem. It's not a problem that took only 1 year to create. It's a historical lack of investment in housing stock, not only here, but across the country over the last generation. But we've got to address it. And we're in a race, just like we were in broadband. Everyone recognizes that they have this problem. We've got to organize ourselves around the same ideas that we did in broadband. And that's exactly what I would propose to you. In fact, this week, we have the second of our forums, which are designed to bring this information to bear to the larger community. We had the first of those last month at SUNY Adirondack. Some of you were there. We certainly welcome any of those that can join us at 10 o'clock at the Queensbury Hotel later this week on the 22nd. But the goal is always the same. It's to share this data, to make sure everyone understands this message that I'm bringing to you. I don't know what the answers are. We're not at that point yet. We need to raise everyone's level of understanding that we have a problem and why it is a problem. Then we'll get to the place about what do we do together? What are the policy choices? What are the funding choices? What are the advocacy choices that we can make? But you have a role in this, just like you did in broadband. Your leadership will be required. In fact, for 3 years, we've carried money in the budget of the EDC and the budget of the LDC to relook housing. I just heard Wayne talk about the need to want to partner with the city and to expand their role in this. I think that's just the beginning, to be honest. No plan that was developed before COVID is relevant right now. All of the migration patterns have changed. Before COVID, people left here in droves. Post-COVID, people are coming here in droves. That's a fundamentally different position. Before COVID, we thought about economic development purely in terms of factories and manufacturing. Today, the largest form of economic movement in our country is one person moving at a time. One person with a professional job that they can do anywhere, oftentimes with a 6-figure salary. They do not require financial incentives. They don't even really want you to bug them. They just need a house and they need a broadband connection. Now, we have largely addressed the first. Not done, but we're on a very good path. But we are not in the right place on the 2nd. And this is not only a challenge for those who want to come here, it's a challenge for those that already live here. Your kids don't have anywhere to move. As I age, I have nowhere to age in place. We don't have the kind of housing stock that appeals to young people to make them want to stay. All of this is part of the challenge we have to address. So not only would I encourage you to join us on the 22nd, we're also going to reinstitute the planning conference that the EDC has had for many years, but that took a pause during COVID last year. We're going to have it at Fort William Henry. It'll be on the 3rd of November. It'll be just like it was before, but it used to be kind of a thing for, the planner in your municipality. I would encourage many of you to consider giving up some, if not all of that day, because we're going to go deep on all of this data. We're going to bring in outside speakers who talk a little bit about what are some of the things we could do. We're going to start talking about some of the things that work or don't work in other places. It's the beginning of that next phase, which is figuring out what comes next. It won't be the end of it. So if you can't come there, we will certainly create more opportunities for you. But your leadership is needed here, as is so many others. Planning board members in our various communities, the zoning board members in the various communities, those that are involved in your planning activities at your municipalities, and those that you might draft. If you have a hamlet in the park and you don't have the ability to do your own land use planning, that's another topic to consider. There are many aspects of this that are going to have to be addressed at once, but we've got to address them. If we don't, we will continue to have housing prices that move only north. We will continue to have people who are essentially disenfranchised from participating in the economy here. And we will certainly have a no thanks, we don't want you sign up at the Northway when people come here trying to figure out, could they move here and bring their professional lives here? It'll take us a long time to work on this. We've got to get busy on it. I would also encourage you, I've heard you talk about, budget priorities. I would encourage you to think about whether or not the money that has already been set aside within the EDC's budget and the LDC's budget is the only investment you want to make in the planning of this in the coming year. In no way do I take this lightly. I understand completely that the idea of asking for more money is never an easy thing. I'm not even sure what I'm asking for, to be honest. But I would ask you to consider whether or not one of these fundamental problems that literally affects every person in Warren County is getting all the attention that it needs. Some of that's money, some of that's leadership, certainly some of that's participation, but we're going to need more to be able to solve this. And as I said, we are in a race. We are in a race with every other county in New York and every other region in the country to figure out whether or not we can solve this before others solve it. If we do, we will get more than our share of the environment, the economic development that it bodes to provide. But if we miss it, we're missing a generational opportunity for us to reinvigorate our workforce, our intellectual capital, our volunteers, the people who run for things like school boards, the people who volunteer for EMS and fire services. Think about the last time we had people who were 30, 35, 40 years old who wanted to come here and how much we could benefit if we figured out how to let more of them come here. We really got to put our heads together on this. So that's my deep plea to you that just as broadband was our focus area of the last year, we need to add housing to it in the coming year. I'd also like to share with you the progress that we are making along with others in this regional approach that we've taken on both broadband and housing towards regional economic development. I sit on a working group of a grant proposal, which is yet to be made, but is being structured right now for more than $75 million under the Build Back Better Challenge program from the Department of Commerce. This is a moonshot. I want to be very clear about expectations. The idea that the North Country would get a $75 million grant to revitalize its wood and paper industry is a big bet, and probably not one that I would make. But it's one that we should at least try. And it certainly helps that we've got this fabric of working with our peer counties. Some of you have been deeply involved in that inter-county work that has created that opportunity. Many of you will have the opportunity going forward to be able to do this. But think about what we could do if we partnered with all in the North Country to take an industry that's already here and reinvigorate it. We certainly want that plant to stay open up in Ticonderoga. It needs support. Otherwise, it will wither and die as other places get subsidies and it does not. That's an important part, even if it's not in Warren County, of the ecosystem of the North Country. It's an important part of the economic fabric that we know works here. We harvest timber. It's part of what goes on in the park. It's part of what goes on in Warren County. But if there's no market for it, that's another industry that moves away. We have the opportunity to invest. In fact, I came from that. The whole reason I'm here, some of you hopefully don't wince and roll your eyes at that idea, but the whole reason I was here, and I met you, Mayor Diamond, in those early days, was I came here to figure out how to take paper and turn it into something people hadn't seen before. The opportunity is real for us to revitalize this industry. Think about all the things that wood and paper could be used for. But we got to partner with others. We won't do this by ourselves in Warren County. We got to do it with everybody who's got timber to be harvested, paper to be made, and intellectual contribution to be made to the problem. All of our communities stand to benefit if we can do this. So I don't know whether we will be successful at this, just like I don't know whether we're going to win the NTIA grant. But I do know that we're sitting at the table with all of our peers trying to figure out if we could make this happen, what would it look like? What would it take? If we're successful at that, we will come back to you. The first grant deadline is in the middle of October. We will come back to you with a proposal for how the phase one essentially lets you get ready to get ready. You potentially get several $100,000 to be able to go build a full grant proposal over 6 to 8 months. That's the time we would engage you. We don't need any particular support that I know of right now for the phase one application in October. But I'm bullish about the process, even if I don't know whether it's going to work out, because I really think it's great for us to be able to work with all of our peers in the North Country on problems that would help us together. And I really think the foundation to be able to do that started right here in this room. Last thing I want to tell you, one of the things we did in the meeting that I was suggesting with Supervisor Hogan that we had earlier with the Chamber of Commerce and with the Warren Washington County IDA and with the Washington County Economic Development Entities was a monthly review of business opportunities across both those counties. We're going to sit down with all of those parties and go through everything we know. They're going to share everything they know, and we're going to figure out whether we're putting all of our resources to best use together. In January, we're proposing to work with the Chamber on developing a set of materials to introduce to the community so they understand what each one of these organizations does and why it works best when they work collaboratively. They are not at odds with each other. In fact, I hear oftentimes this idea that there's alphabet soup and there's confusion and redundancy. There may be confusion. There's not redundancy. You know, what the IDA does is fundamentally different than what an organization like the EDC does, which is fundamentally different than what an LDC does. And that is fundamentally different than what a chamber does. But communities that succeed are the ones that figure out how to take all of those capabilities and combine them for maximum and optimum outcome. Not competition with each other, certainly not fighting with each other for resources, but figuring out how to point those shared resources together for maximum community benefit. I can share with you that the leaders of all those organizations all believe that. We had a very, very healthy discussion the other day. I think, you know, maybe you'll have an opportunity to comment on that, Supervisor Hogan. But I want to tell you that we're alive and well on that front. I think we have good community leaders that are all focused on how do we do what we do for the maximum effect with everyone else. So with that, I'd like to shift quickly to the LDC. We need to give you a regular update about the LDC itself. The LDC has been involved in a lot of looking at its own formation and structure this year. We do have a viable loan application in process now, which is good news. For most of the year, we did not. I'm very bullish about that loan application. I'm hopeful to be able to bring it to the LDC board in the coming 30 to 60 days. We also have the contracts finally approved. So we're finally on firm ground. There's a contract between the LDC and the county, and there's a contract between the county, between the LDC and the EDC to conduct its business. We're hopeful that next year it will go faster than September for us to be able to put those in place, but we finally have them in place now. We're going to develop a workshop in October. I don't remember the date, but I will certainly pass it on so it can be shared with all of you. That date is designed to bring information about other loan programs and criterias that the LDC could consider in the coming years to be able to benefit both the business and the regular public with the resources it has consistent with its mission. We're not suggesting any particular change, but our Banking Review Committee has suggested several things that we want to bring to bear with the board. You may be interested in these things, and if so, we'd welcome your participation in that workshop. No decisions obviously will be made, no votes will be taken, but we will go deep on some of these ideas. They include whether or not LDC funds could be used for what we consider to be residential support, things like sewer connections, septic systems in areas not already covered, even broadband extensions. If somebody lives at the end of a long right of way, maybe they have half a mile to where that fiber is and they can't afford the cost to be able to wire that all the way to their home. The idea of whether or not LDC funds could be used to connect them in some kind of loan portfolio is at least an option. In addition, we're also looking at whether or not businesses need different kinds of funding and financing post-COVID. Things like the cost of materials after you've started a construction project going up 30%. How would we develop a backstop against that? Also, supply chain costs that businesses are experiencing now where they have to buy more inventory for longer periods of time. Lead times go from 30 to 60 days to 90 or 180 days. And the amount of material that they buy sometimes is tripling. All of that has cost. All of that then competes with the ability for them to hire people. I was with a business 2 weeks ago, and I literally watched them turn to their workforce and say, we could either buy materials or we can hire more people. We got to figure it out. I'd love to be able to figure out if there's a way we could create an opportunity for them not to have to make that choice, but to be able to do both. Whether we do that or not is completely up to the LDC board, but we certainly want to present these options for consideration. And then I think the last thing I would tell you is that the LDC is a full participant in that process with the chamber and the various IDAs. In fact, it was suggested at the last LDC meeting that maybe the Warren Washington County IDA might be interested in actually running the Warren County LDC. I think that was seen with interest by the members of the IDA who I talked to later in that day. I think their point was, why would we do that? We're already working well together now. I think that's really where our focus is from an LDC, at least from an administrative standpoint, is trying to figure out how do we continue to make that kind of relationship even richer? How do we figure out how to get in front of businesses together and figure out how to get both types of benefits in consideration and available to them for maximum benefit? So with that, I open myself to any questions and look forward to talking with you all about all these things in the months ahead.
Thank you, Jim. As always, a lot of great information. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hogan. Couple things. One, I just got something here from Charter. It looks like the town of Chester got 340 plus new connections in this past year. It was part of their 145,000 build out, and they covered a lot of town. A lot because there was a threat from another competitor that was going up to the north and to the west of our area here. But it was good to have. We look forward to getting more hooked up. We're going well on that. Housing. According to the census, the town of Chester has lost 169 households in the past 10 years. Don't know where they went. We've added to our housing stock, and every apartment is filled, as you were saying, Jim, about the inventory for sale and for rent. It's right down there. So I just don't know how we lost that many houses on our watch here. I don't think it happened. Forestry, as lumber prices really increased this past year, I looked over the trend of stumpage prices, and it's put out by the DEC every quarter. And then based on my own experience back in 1987, We sold some timber at $240 a thousand board feet. It's a little less than that right now. And it just amazes me on how the value of our raw resource has gone down over the past 34 years. And so finding a new sources for our raw product and keeping it within the blue line or maybe a little outside of it, it will be a real game changer for all landowners in our area. And the housing study though, where is the progress on that? When will it get started and when will it be done?
We're in collaboration. In fact, the county's housing planning staff sits on our housing work group and meets with us weekly. I don't know the answer to your question, but I know that all of us are planning it to be executed in the coming year. Exactly in what format and exactly at what scale is still in discussion. We have the funds from the LDC and the EDC committed. Whether or not there are other funds and whether or not there are additional scope from what was originally envisioned is the time to participate in that conversation is now. Would you agree, Wayne?
Yeah. There is a pending application as part of that $787,000 I talked about that would provide $50,000 towards that housing study. That's kind of what we're waiting on to see how we're going to go forward, whether we come to this board for additional funding. If that doesn't get funded, whether, just what the whole scope will be is part of that housing task force or group that didn't talk about.
The previous focus was on affordable housing, and what we're trying to do is increase the spectrum to where it would consider all forms of, or as many forms of housing as we can possibly afford to do.
Right. The study needs to have a utility to it so you can take those results and build out what needs to be done, right?
The other thing we have to do is incorporate the housing statistics from the census, which won't be released, the detailed housing census until early next year.
Right.
Because the grant agencies, no matter what else you do, the grant agencies really look at the census data. So if we don't incorporate that into any kind of study or report, it's going to be useless.
Supervisor Driscoll?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Jim, is there going to be a repeat to the presentation that took place 2 or 3 weeks ago up at SUNY Adirondack? I thought that I got an email recently that
We're having chapter 2 this Wednesday.
okay, yeah.
At the Queensbury Hotel at 10 o'clock. We would welcome you and anyone else that would like to come. And any of the materials we covered there, if you're not able to get there, we would certainly be able to get to you.
Okay, so it's the chapter 2, a follow-up to
Yes.
that initial meeting. Great, thanks.
Supervisor Beatty?
Yeah, thanks, Chairwoman. I appreciate it. One of the housing challenges I think that many of us maybe aren't even aware of is the fact that these LLCs are buying up homes to be year-round STRs. I know, for example, just one in Queensbury owns 12 homes. Doesn't live in Queensbury, but has 12 homes that are year-round STRs. Now, when we think, well, why is our population going down? Why is our housing being cut short? Why are we shrinking in housing? I would say that, Jim, you need to look at that very closely because in the tourist areas, that's becoming big business and we don't even know it. It's when people are buying up home after home after home and renting it year round. So obviously there's no residents living there, permanent residents. So your resident count goes down, your housing count goes down. All right. And obviously they don't have kids. So the school districts start shrinking too. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know one in Queensbury that has 12 homes alone that are no one lives there. That's just one example.
So we look forward to the Granicus data that the county will soon have. That will be another source of information here. Important to understand that the heritage of this place is that it was built around seasonal home. So this is a longstanding problem. It may be worse. It certainly has implications on whatever we do, but it is something that we have had in our history forever, particularly around the lake, but oftentimes throughout the course of the North Country. There's always been seasonal homeowners we've got to figure out how to be able to meet that demand and meet the demand of the full-time year residents. And I don't know the answers, but I know we'll start pouring over the data together with you.
Supervisor Beatty?
Yeah, just to follow up. Yeah. Jim, those are two separate issues though. The people who rent their homes in the summer or whatever for a month or two, that's always been done. You're correct. That's been done for 30, 40, 50 years. But what hasn't ever been done is people buying up homes to rent them year round and never moving in and never being a resident. The people up the lake, I know a ton of them. They rent their homes out in the summer for the track season for a week here, 2 weeks here and stuff. And that's been going on and will always go on. But the difference is now we have corporations coming in and buying up homes to rent year round, henceforth no residents, henceforth population decline and housing decline. So thank you.
This is a really great conversation, and I encourage everyone to continue this Wednesday at 10 o'clock at the Queensbury at the EDC housing meeting. Does anybody have any other questions for Jim while we have him here? Thank you for being here. All right, with that, motion to adjourn. So is there any public comment? No? Motion to adjourn.
All right.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Frazier. Supervisor Leggett, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent, thanks.